Welcome to the Tarot Coven Cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hello out there, lovely listeners, and welcome to the Tarot Coven Cast. I'm one of your hosts, Jasmine.
And I'm Jechanovia.
And on this bonus episode, I'll be exploring the Zodiac sign of Cancer, while Jechanovia shares the magic of the Celtic Tree sign, Oak. So let's dive right in. All right, here we are at Cancer, our fourth sign. It's our first water sign. Very exciting. So some approximate dates for Cancer season are June 21st to July 22nd. But actually in 2021, Cancer season is going to kick off on June 20th to July 22nd this year. And that also, of course, encompasses the summer solstice and Letha. And of course, our very own Jechanovia's birthday. Yeah. At this point now, we have been through all of the elements. We're coming up on our first water sign, but now we're returning to a cardinal sign, right? So we kicked things off with Aries, which was also a cardinal sign, but now we're back to cardinal, just with water this time. And just like we were talking about a feminine or a receptive sign with Taurus, we are back to another feminine and receptive sign with Cancer. So kind of my point there was that all of the signs will have something in common for the most part, but they're all different mixes of everything. So, all water signs are feminine or receptive, but Cancer is the only cardinal water sign. And then there are 4 different cardinal signs, but there's one of each element, right? So we'll start with polarity. As I just said, feminine or receptive, it's a yin sign. The feminine signs or the receptive signs they can also sort of be known as like the nighttime signs, whereas the more masculine or yang signs could be daytime. So anyways, so we're on a feminine yin receptive sign, which could be also known as a nighttime sign. The key word might be to inhale as opposed to exhale, right? And receptive signs tend to be introverted, magnetic, instinctive, and intuitive. And so now let's talk about Cancer's element, which is the interaction of the sign with the world. And as I said, it's a water sign. So water is wet and cold. It's emotional and focused on feelings. Water signs are sensitive signs that really do benefit from their sharp sixth sense. They are very motivated by feelings and mood. And some keywords might be nurturing, sensitive, and hidden, which I feel kind of works for all of the water signs, but particularly Cancer, given its association with the crab. They kind of like to, go within in that way.
Yeah.
And the sort of protective elements that and we'll get into that as well. Okay, so now we'll talk about the modality, the mode of the existence of the sign, which is cardinal. So in this case, when we talked about Aries, it was the initiation of spring. Cancer is the initiation of summer. It's the giver of warmth. It's the changing of the tides and moods, and it's changing based on its own needs. So cardinal signs are generating, purposeful, and catalyzing. They tend to find ease with starting, but some difficulty with finishing. And there can be an impatience and a quality of overcommitting with cardinal signs. So when we combine the water element with the cardinal modality, we get the initiator of life, the primordial waters, or water as a life source. So, breast milk, womb fluids, wells, and springs. There is a drive to protect these sources and keep them safe because they provide life and they sustain life and they nurture life. So when we were in Gemini season, we were in this sort of mode of being wet and hot, whereas Cancer is wet and cold. So the desire for connection will still remain during Cancer season, but it sort of shifts from external or mentally driven to being more internal and emotionally driven. Because when we're talking about they're both wet signs in nature, but hot being, it's rising, it's coming out, it's coming to the surface, whereas something that's cold is going to draw more inwards. It's going to come more internal. It's going to be that inhale instead of that exhale. And there's some real nesting energy with Cancer. This is the sign that sets an emotional precedent. And because it's cardinal, it is still taking action, but it's going to take action on emotions and intuition. So the planetary ruler of Cancer is the moon. And the moon is this like lovely celestial body that's all about emotions and feelings and our habitual responses. And I think it's important with the moon to remember that comfort is very relative. So what's comfortable to Jechanovia might not be comfortable to me and vice versa. And we could throw Elena in that mix too. You know, what's comfortable for Elena might not be comfortable for either of us. So the moon can kind of show us the different ways that we find comfort.
Okay.
And I would say that any Cancer placement would be subject to the movement of the moon. It would be subject to its fluctuations and I think that's the best word, its fluctuations. So Cancer is where Jupiter finds its exaltation. And so Jupiter in Cancer really speaks to an emotional generosity, a mutual nourishment. Cancer provides the sustenance that Jupiter needs to allow growth. The cardinal nature of Cancer is really conducive to Jupiter's need to stretch and grow. So kind of opposite from the moon, we would find Saturn in its detriment or its exile. So this is the opposite sign. Cancer is the opposite sign of Capricorn, where Saturn is at home. So, being the furthest away from its home, that's where it would be in its exile. And it's because like Saturn's restrictive nature is kind of too limiting for Cancer. Saturn moves really slow and the moon is the fastest mover in our skies. So they're completely at odds in that way. And there's this enduring quality to Saturn where the moon wants us to do more than just that. The moon wants us to be comfortable and to thrive more than just surviving,
That contrast really helps. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the opposite to sort of what we were talking about with Jupiter. Cancer is where Mars finds its depression. And that's because Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So like we were just talking about, Capricorn is Saturn's sign. And when Mars is in Saturn, it's like fiery energy is kind of tempered and Saturn can give it some restrictions within which to like burn and blaze its trail. But in Cancer, there's a really indirect energy and nature to Cancer, probably because of the rulership of the moon, right? And that doesn't vibe very well with the very direct nature of Mars. So Mars is very combative. It likes to separate, it likes to sever, and the moon really wants to nurture and protect. So those things don't really tend to mesh super well.
I have this mental picture of like for the Cancer energy not being direct. So it's like the little crab that does the sideways crab walk, like, all the way around the outside rather than just pushing right through the middle.
Totally. And what's interesting is that Mars is this very direct take action planet. And Cancer is a cardinal sign and it does like to take action, but it takes action in a much different way. Like it is somewhat like the moon. It fluctuates and like you're talking about with the crab, and I actually have a note on this further down below. I'll just say it now because I was going to move on to the keywords and themes, and this is in that section. But Cancer is represented by the crab, which doesn't move linearly. Like it moves forward, but in its own way. And it's in a way that it can keep things protected as it moves. So if it has to pivot in order to protect, it will. But that's, in its calculations, that's the best way forward is to pivot.
Okay. Oh, okay. I love this imagery. Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, so back to the top of the keywords and themes, the sort of sentence or mantra for Cancer would be, I feel. And there's this quality of care versus insecurity. What this means basically is that Cancer wants to protect, but it also wants to be protected. And so I think that when it doesn't find that protection, or when it doesn't feel like what it's protecting really cares or is showing any sort of gratitude towards that, I think that insecurity can come from that because it feels that the output that it's giving isn't being recognized, but it's also not getting anything back. So it's feeling a little empty in that way.
Yeah, like the way I understand it is like the Cancer energy, it's protective of everyone, but it's very reluctant to protect itself. So it expects that same treatment from the ones it protects. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's this sort of reciprocal caretaking that I think Cancer seeks out. My next note even says like there's a nourishment aspect. It wants to feed and it wants to be fed. So just as much as Cancer energy will seek to nurture you and to nourish you, it does want that back. And so, yeah, but I can totally see an insecurity stemming from that, where if you don't feel like you're getting it back, you might start wondering like, oh my God, well, why am I doing this? And am I not good enough for this sort of nourishment? And I think it also maybe has to do with like the needy nature that Cancer can sometimes have, or that needy energy, because it does just want to, like maybe sometimes when it's not in its best placement or some of the shadow energy is coming out, like it might be seeking too much. And maybe a way to balance that is to go back to the giving side, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So back to keywords and themes, the need to give and receive emotional warmth and security. Cancer can become a little overcommitted or overly involved. Sometimes with Cancer energy, I kind of see like a little bit of like overbearing figure in a way, like no matter who that is, it could be, you know, the stupid stereotypical mom thing, or it could be a friend. It could be anybody, like anybody that's too much in your business and is caring a little bit too much. Maybe that's that insecurity angle too. Like they need to kind of get back to themselves at that moment. Yeah. So reciprocal caretaking, Cancer energy can sometimes be moody and needy and emotionally demanding. And I do think that has to do with the moon, because when we think about, so the moon ruling over Cancer, the moon is changing signs every 2 to 3 days. So that idea of comfort being subjective is also changing all the time for the moon itself, like because it is living in all of these different places from sort of day to day to day. So it's kind of seeking its comfort in all of these different ways too. So Cancer energy is also very security conscious. It can very much anticipate the needs of others. It's comfort seeking and safety seeking. And it's changeable, but with a purpose. So usually we use the word changeable to describe a mutable sign like Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, because they very easily go with the flow. But with Cancer, it's kind of like what I was saying about with the movement of the crab. Like Cancer will change when it knows that it's beneficial for the outcome. So walking in the crab ways instead of directly. But it's not going to change just because, okay, cool, let's do this now. Oh, okay, cool, let's do this now. Okay, whatever, let's go this way. It's like, let me think about this for a second. Okay, that makes sense. That's going to be the best way forward. I will change. It's like your GPS recalculating and figuring out the best way to move forward. Like if it knows that pivoting is the best idea, it's going to pivot. So, and then just a couple of other keywords here would be nurture, create, grow, vintage, and sentimental. Well, so now we'll talk about the tarot associations. So we got the Chariot for Cancer itself, my least favorite card. There's the High Priestess, which is connected to the moon. Venus in Cancer is connected to the Two of Cups. Then there's Mercury in Cancer for the Three of Cups and the Moon in Cancer for the Four of Cups. Let's talk about some ways to use the Cancer energy. So as always, first you want to look to what house Cancer rules in your chart, because during Cancer season, the sun really brings its illumination to that area and kind of really highlights the topics that are associated with that house. So you'll also want to look to wherever the moon is, of course, because I was talking about how the moon rules over Cancer, because I think its placement can really help to further define the Cancer house and its purpose, its direction, its qualities. You know, whatever house Cancer rules over, the moon is going to rule that house because it's the planet that rules over Cancer. So it's going to have an effect no matter what. And I think that this is a great time to check in on and make more time for your loved ones. Make sure these relationships really respect that need for reciprocal care. I think it might be a great time to start a new routine or even maybe a ritual, just because it is a cardinal sign. And since it's ruled by the moon, if you've been looking for a time to like really get into celebrating the new and the full moons or getting into some sort of planetary ritual, I think this would be a really great time. Also a nice time to spruce up your home, maybe make it a little bit more comfortable. And again, that's so relative, so it's whatever is comfortable to you. If you've been thinking about sort of connecting with, you know, family members that maybe you don't speak to that often for whatever reason, or if you wanted to look into some ancestry, I think this would be a great time. And since it's also the summer solstice, I think it would be perfect to sort of take stock of the past 6 months since the winter solstice. Really think about everything that's happened since then, all the steps that you've taken, how far you've come. I mean, even if you've just made it through, like, way to go. It's 6 months, And then a great time to also, I think, look ahead for the next 6 months and consider where you might want to be at the next winter solstice. And this kind of relates back to what we were saying before with that quality of insecurity. But I think Cancer season would be a wonderful time to reinvest in your own nourishment and consider what your sort of like base needs are. Definitely a time to be giving your intuition more credit. So even if that just means, I fall out of this all the time where I just I'm in a real mental place and I'm not listening as much to my body or my intuition, but this is a great season to really reconnect with that. And then I would say also just be aware of changing moods and fluctuating feelings. We are dealing with the sign that's ruled by the moon, and it's also a sign, as I mentioned, it's the crab. So it's really tender insides and tough outer shells. So we might be going back and forth between those two modes and everything that's in between. And, if you're doing it, then the people around you are probably doing it. And just, give everybody a little bit of extra love, I think, and tenderness.
Room.
Yeah. And I think after a month spent focused on mental energy, especially because at this time we are also going through a Mercury retrograde and connecting in that sort of more mental and external way, I think it's really time to come back to our body and embodiment. And so it's okay to feel things and sink into those feelings and just allow those things to guide you. I think this is a great time to just slow down again. Gemini wanted us to be out and about and doing all the things and talking all the talks and learning whatever. And this is a good time to just slow. Even though it is a cardinal sign, we can still be moving forward in a more slow and methodical and thoughtful way. So take a chill, enjoy the summer solstice. I always look forward to Cancer season. It's always good. If you have water placements in your chart, anytime it's a water season, it's a good time. So I'm always looking forward to it.
It's, summer fun time.
Exactly.
It's,
yeah.
Chill out on your back deck, have a good time, listen to some good music.
Yeah.
I keep going back to what you were saying about the moon and how, it affects. The moon has an influence we already know that, influence on the oceans, influence on everything, right?
Yeah.
On people. So does that mean in Cancer season, even if maybe somebody only has a tiny bit of Cancer in their chart, would they still be influenced a little extra by the moon during Cancer season regardless, simply because of that?
I would say so. Yeah. I think every time the sun moves into a different sign, whatever planet rules that sign is coming a little bit more into focus because the sun is illuminating that area. So
right.
I would say that, just like how when we were in Gemini season, Mercury plays a little bit more of a role.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. So
on everything. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And obviously any planets that you have in Cancer are going to be making some sort of aspect with the sun as the sun moves through.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking that I'm going to have to look at my chart because obviously I can't remember where all my Cancer is. I know I've got quite a bit of it, but
I think you've got about 3 planets in there. Obviously your sun, because you're born during Cancer season. So it'll be your solar return, right? Your sun is returning to the same point it was when you were born. And then I think you've got 2 other planets in there. So it's going to hit those planets too. And
yeah, it'll be a good time.
I think so. Yeah.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah. For some people, I do kind of wonder if maybe Cancer rising. So your ascendant is always ruled by the moon. So you probably always have a really big connection with the moon, right? For somebody like you, Jechanovia, that has a nighttime chart, your sect light is the moon. So people with night charts will probably also always feel a little bit more influenced by the moon as well, or at least a little more connected or drawn in by it or things like that. But But I think everyone can benefit from the lush, emotional, touchy-feely goodness of Cancer season.
Eat all the good food.
Yes, the comforting vibes and nurturing vibes. I don't know why. My grandmother wasn't a Cancer, but I always just think about my nanny when I think about Cancer because she was just the most anybody could show up to Christmas dinner and she would have an extra seat ready like that.
Yeah.
Like she was just so ready to feed people
like
and take care of people. And, even though she was, so poor, she had nothing, but she gave it to everybody. And so I don't know. I always just think about that energy, like just that real love. And yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
Let's dive into oak. I'm so excited.
Let's go. Okay. Oak, as many people know, is the tree of the Druids. It's like the Druid tree.
Okay, so this is a big one.
It is. It's very important. And that's why when you were asking if I had any photos of oak, I was like, no, but I really wish I did because I don't have oak on my property. And it hurts my heart that I don't have oak on my property. But yeah, it's called in the oak alphabet, it's called dur, and that means door or gateway. So the word druid actually derives from that. And it translates, depending on your source, oak knower, magician, sorcerer, seer, or in a couple of cases, just the people of the trees. Ooh. So I'm like, how appropriate. Yeah. Well, and I really love that it translates to door or gateway. I mean, it'll make more sense as we move on, but it's interesting because before I knew I was a druid, I was doing a meditation. Actually, this is how I found out that I was a druid. Is like, I was in this meditation, I was going towards this giant oak tree and I kind of knelt down to do whatever, pray or whatever with it. And I ended up jumping down into the roots of this giant oak tree. And that's where, everything else, I actually wrote about it and I know I've got it somewhere in notes. I'll share it.
Yeah.
But it was a really cool experience. And anyway, that's how I knew that I was a druid, is because this oak tree in a meditation.
That's so magical.
It was. And it was one of those experiences that just would not leave my brain. So I had to write it down. And that's why I now have it written down.
That's cool.
Okay. In the last episode, we were talking about the hawthorn. And I mentioned the sacred druid trio of trees. So the oak, ash, and thorn. So oak is one of those sacred trees, obviously. It's also the Celtic tree of life. So it nurtures and balances all of life. So it holds life in its branches and it feeds and it shelters and it protects. So it's just that tree of life. So I know everybody's probably seen those Celtic symbols, like the tree, and like you can reverse it upside down and it's the same. That's the oak tree. So that's what that symbol is. So the approximate dates for oak season is June 10th to July 7th. It's the 7th month of the Celtic tree calendar. And from the Handbook of Celtic Astrology, it's 18 degrees Gemini to 14 degrees 59 minutes Cancer. The polarity is masculine, active, which I thought was interesting because that's opposite of the Cancer. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is that there's a lot of goddesses associated with the oak. So I think there is also a lot of feminine energy in there. Even the element is water. So it's a very feminine tree. So the ruling planet is Jupiter. And Jupiter in the Celtic zodiac represents the gatekeeper. So it's responsible for opening and expanding your consciousness. So opening the doors so that you can kind of reach into other realms and get information and grow from it and, bring that back to Earth. And also Mars, ready to stand up for what's right and not budge from the truth, which is all that strength and stability that the oak offers. Deities associated are the Dagda, Brigid, Dana or Danu, Greenman, Janus. And then we have Pan, we have Hecate, Darren, and Darren is actually the ancient oak goddess. Also is Odin and Thor. And with oak, it connects you with any of your ancestral gods. So even if you're not of Celtic origin, working with oak energy can help you connect to the deities and your ancestors and you're basically your own personal bloodline history. I've seen a lot of spells that help connect you with your ancestors and do that kind of work. So it just makes sense that it would actually be that threshold in that doorway.
So that's like our first connection then with if you were using Cancer season to kind of look into some ancestry, get some oak tree on your side.
Exactly. Collect out some acorns, put them in your pocket. All right. So moving into like the mythology and the symbols and all that fun stuff. So oak, as we've talked about, is the gateway to the other world, which other world, I think that's a Druid term. But if you're not familiar with it, it just means like the spirit realm, like heaven or, other planes. But the other world is what I call it. It connects you with the mysteries of the earth, sky, and spirit realms. The essence, it's the essence of mundane magic. So our entire existence is like made up of a trillion tiny little miracles. And oak kind of helps us to recognize those little tiny miracles rather than, just going on with our day and not grounding into that magical energy that's everywhere. Okay, so we can use oak to help us on spiritual journeys. It can act as an anchor. So if you do any astral travel during meditations, whether you can hold a piece of it in your hand or an acorn or sit under an oak tree is even better, I suppose, if it's safe to do so. So strength and stability and reaching your full potential. Oak offers us protection and shielding. So going back to kind of history stuff, a lot of ancient shields were actually made out of oak because it was such a dense protective wood. And a lot of times, like in a lot of Celtic tribes, they would carve oak trees into them, used in spells to attract like an abundant harvest and to ensure success. Using acorns as altar tools is a really good practice, using them in ingredients for spells. You can carry them in your pocket for good luck in business. So if you have a job interview or a business meeting or whatever, just kind of carry a couple acorns in your pocket. Nobody's going to know. They're nice and tiny. They symbolize physical health and well-being, a connection between earth and spirit realm, and sovereignty and leadership. So that's a lot of like the crests of old school kings and stuff and regal families. They would have an oak somewhere worked into it because it's that sovereign royalty, regal energy around it. So they would do that for symbolism. So oak also gives us the courage to be ourselves and stand tall if you are a member of the LGBTQ community, because we're going into Pride Month. Maybe try to work with oak if you're going to pride parades, or if you're planning on coming out this month. This is definitely a really good energy to work with. There's actually quite a few. If you look online, there's some protective spells that you can do before you actually come out, and it gives you kind of the confidence and the security. And even sometimes it's journal prompts on, so you know what you're going to say ahead of time, and then you can kind of think about the reactions you might be getting from the people that you're coming out to. So anyway, it's a really good energy to work with if you're in that kind of situation as well. And like I said, we're in Pride Month now, June 1st.
Yeah.
So I thought that might be really useful information for a lot of people. So what else? Okay, so oak it symbolizes justice and freedom and endurance, bravery in battles. Now this, of course, we're talking battles in war and history, but also battling depression and, battling bad habits, battling a shitty boss. Like there's all kinds of different battles that we fight on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be something massive like a, knights in shining armor battle.
Yeah.
So bravery comes in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
Oak leaves and acorns protect against illness in spell work. When you use it in spell work, not that you're going to get ill from spell work. I worded that terribly.
I mean, maybe, but I get what you're saying, but yeah,
possible.
I don't know. Could happen, maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
You don't put enough lime in the coconut, you never know.
Then you're fucked.
Well, that's going in the teaser.
Absolutely. So the wands. So making a wand out of oak. I hate to come off as a warning because what I say is not like gospel. So if this doesn't resonate, leave it. It's fine. But when you're going to use a wand made out of oak, understand that it's extremely powerful. Like the oak is the king, right? Oak is king tree. It definitely should not be used lightly or without clarity and practice. Do not use it for like revenge magic or anything like that because it'll come back and bite you in the ass. Especially because remember, it's ruled by Jupiter. And so anything you do it has the possibility that it's going to explode back in your face.
Amplify.
So if you're if you're using an oak wand, in my practice, I would say be very careful and mindful about what you're using it for. Yeah, I hate to be the doom and gloom, like, oh my God, don't touch it. That's definitely not the...
Well, no, I think there's ways that you can use that productively and positively, though, too.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So a semi-related cool story, because I'm a fucking nerd. Sometime during the Bronze Age, because I just know you're going to like this story. That's why I was like, I'm putting it in. I'm totally putting it in. So sometime during the Bronze Age, which was around 3,300 BC to 1,200 BC.
Old as fuck.
A long time ago. An arc druid accurately predicted a 3-day solar eclipse.
What? How?
Exactly.
First of all, how the prediction? Second of all, how 3 days? I just want to say this is why back in the day, eclipses were not seen as the good new and full moon. Like they were seen as omens. This was bad times. People took shelter during eclipses. They were do not do your new moon intentions. Do not do your full moon release. Like just go inside and rest and chill. I mean,
it was like severe.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, imagine back in the day, you lived then, you know, and all of a sudden the sun's gone for 3 days.
Yeah. You are in darkness for 3 days.
Yes.
You don't have the internet to be like, hey, why is it dark out? What's an eclipse?
Yeah.
I mean, you are just living now where like, okay, the sun has been stolen. The
sun's gone.
End times are around the corner.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so the reason I found this so cool is because obviously the Druids were like really learned astronomers and astrologers.
So
like
cool.
I would say that has to be some serious astrology work to be able to time it. I don't know. It was just very cool.
Oh, so cool. You were right. I love that.
All right. Okay. So we've got some sacrificial energy. So Jupiter was considered the sacrificer. In some Druid circles, the Archdruid was actually considered the embodiment of Jupiter energy. So this is why that specific person would make the offerings and sacrifices. Now, understand in that time, all we know of the Druids is what outsiders wrote down. And those outsiders generally were of the Christian persuasion and the invader and the colonizers' persuasion. And they really didn't like Druids because they held so much power. So we're only getting a tiny fraction of the story. And the sacrifices, a lot of times it was criminals. It was a hard time, but it was criminals, and it was volunteers who volunteered to sacrifice themselves. And human sacrifice itself was really rare. It was usually like livestock, which then they would have a big party and eat. Yeah. It would be a festival. Or, you know, different totems and whatever that people sacrifice. But anyway, so the Archdruid was generally the one in charge of that, saying, okay, you want this? Okay, you need to sacrifice A, B, and C to this god. So they just knew they had all this information, and it's memorized. It was all oral. Nothing was written down.
Wow.
And that's why it was such a long learning process.
Yeah. Which
just ties into the oak knowing, because the oak held all that wisdom. The oak held all of that cosmic energy and that cosmic connection. And that's why Druids were so interactive with the oak trees. All that to say that this is a really, really good time to sacrifice things that aren't going well or that aren't keeping you healthy, that aren't serving you in the long term. This is definitely the time to sacrifice it. Sacrifice it on the altar of enough of this bullshit. It's time to say goodbye.
Yeah. See you later.
It's also the season of great manifestation. But this is a warning of be careful what you wish for, because the oak wants us to be consciously aware of the consequences of every single action. So for everything you're going to take, you have to be willing to give something back. So the sacrifice is not optional here. If you're going to manifest something, you have to sacrifice something. So,
I mean, I think we should just use that year round, honestly, because if we're trying to hold on to something with both hands, we can't also let go. Or if we're trying to let go, we can't also hold on. So it kind of feels like those two things always have to live in some sort of relationship with one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting
like you can't pick something up if your hands are full.
Yes, exactly.
It's so true.
In my brain, that made so much sense. I was like, oh yeah, that really works. But then it came out as garbledy-gook. It's like, have you ever just like looked at your hands and been like, I can't hold all this, man. I gotta let some go. Like that's how it came out. I don't know why. I'm glad you got it.
That's actually not how it came out, but it's great. I liked your recap better. It was
as long
fun.
as you got it.
Okay. All right. So this is also a time for us to speak the truth or seek out and uncover the truth, depending on the situation. It brings things to light, for better or for worse. May not be stuff you want to see and hear, but it is what it is. That's very summer solstice energy as well, though. Like it's just really uncovering those secret dark shadow corners, and, you know, you're flipping over every rock. And okay, so oak actually brings us a warning to control our tone and our intent. So a reminder that there's a difference between saying it like it is and just being an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. I know I've mentioned this in a past episode, but it's like super duper true right now. So make sure when you're saying something, you're not being vindictive or superior, or like, if you don't need to say it, you don't need to say it. Right. Just keep your mouth shut. What else do we have? We have respecting boundaries and expecting others to also respect your boundaries. Always use discretion. And for the love of gods, do not take part in any kind of gossip. Just leave it at the door. So for practical applications of using oak, it's really not a great time for like any potentially risky financial or any other kind of major investments. But if you do choose to invest in something or, agree to something, look everything over like 5 times and then get some kind of unbiased third party to look it over twice more. Like just do not fall for anything because it's not the time for that kind of activity. It's a time to embrace any natural leadership qualities that you might have and put them to good use. And you might face a lot of temptation and greed right now, but anyone who slips is going to be found out and exposed. So, hold to your morals. Don't do anything sketchy. Don't do anything shady because, like I said, everything's going to come to light. You're not going to get away with it. Before speaking or taking any action on something, ask yourself if you're doing it because it's right or because you just want the glory or the recognition that comes with it. So it's a lot of like that performative activism and stuff. You want to steer clear of that. You want to do it because it's meaningful to you and you want to make an actual difference rather than you just want to make sure everybody knows that you're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So like, don't make your logo a rainbow flag if you don't give a fuck about LGBTQ plus community the rest of the year.
Or if you only care about one of them for your own personal gratification.
Sure, yeah.
Straight white men. You can cut that out. That's fine.
What?
I just whispered straight white men into my microphone.
Oh, I won't cut that. I don't cut the truth out of this podcast.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so this is a good time to sit with yourself, with your inner self, and take stock of your own beliefs, your morals, just yourself in general, and decide if anything needs to change in order to realign or to align with your own personal truth. And it's also about uncovering those spiritual truths about yourself, maybe something you didn't realize, that one of your core beliefs or your core passions. This is the time to like do that soul searching and figure out what fires you up, what makes you happy, and go for it. And then finally, for this section, there's this really great quote I read from Helena Patterson's book that I mentioned before, the Celtic Astrology book. So the significance of the oak tree month, therefore, it marked a turning point in earthly experience when the soul or higher self is raised to the heights of Gwynfyd, I think is how you pronounce it. So basically that's Gwynfyd is your spiritual awakening, bliss, union with deity, your communion with the gods.
Cool.
So it's like that higher consciousness. So I just thought it's again with that doorway and the gateway. I just really loved that quote, that it's just that connection. Okay, so the divination associations. So the rune is Ansus, I think is how you pronounce it. So in Celtic lore, in Celtic runes, that's oak. And in Germanic runes, that's actually God. So it's really cool how God and oak are tandem. Mm-hmm. Now, for the Germanic side of it, it actually also represents ash, the ash tree, which we're going to be talking about in another episode. So I'll wait for the rest of that. That's in like February, March-ish.
Okay.
So stay tuned for the whole story behind that. Super cool story. For the tarot, I've got the Strength card because oak represents strength and power. King of Cups, because it's like that gentle strength, that water energy, but channeled into stability. The High Priestess, so calling in wisdom from beyond, spiritual truths. The Magician is working with magic, so Druids. Dancing between the earth and the spirit realms. The Four of Pentacles, because it's kind of gathering your own earthly wisdom and forming your own connections with the earth. And then the Ten of Pentacles, so it's, that completion, that peak, everything's done, we're good.
I love the way you said about the Magician dancing between the earth and spirit realms. That's so cool.
Now, I did actually have a little bit more I wanted to talk about, like with Druidry and the way it's been recorded in history and where to find information, but I think we'll talk about that more behind the scenes. Ooh. Because it might be a juicy conversation that our patrons might like. So if you want in on that and you're not a patron, you should head over to our Patreon.
Nudge, nudge.
And check it out. Yeah, we'd love to have you over there.
Yeah, come hang out with us. We always have tons of behind the scenes goodies, and I feel like we've done this a couple of times with our bonus series. There's been questions afterwards that we've had for each other, or just like more info. And I already know a couple of bits from this episode are going to get chunked into the behind the scenes. So yeah, lots of goodies. But okay, cool. Well, that will wrap it up for the regular episode of Cancer and Oak. And we'll be back as always next month with our next 2 signs. But Thanks everyone for listening. Happy Cancer season.
And happy oak season.
Thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode of the Tarot Coven Cast. Stay tuned for our next bonus episode when we'll be talking about the Zodiac sign Leo and the Celtic Tree sign Holly. And for our next regularly scheduled episode, which is the season 2 finale. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.